Just when you think you've got it figured out, you don't. Welcome to Stanley Cupdate, product of the NHL Wraparound podcast for Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Vic and Neil here. So, just when you think you've got it figured out, we know nothing.
And nobody knows nothing. That's really the truth, because you can't predict this stuff. I mean, that's what's making watching these playoffs so much fun, is that you just don't know what's going to happen. There were years ago, Vic, when we were younger. Of course, everybody was younger.
Yeah.
And anyway, the playoffs were very predictable. I mean, I'm talking about during the 90s at times when you'd get down, and I think there was 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row where the final was a sweep.
Yeah.
Because every year you'd know, well, that team's going to win. I remember the year in 1998 when Washington made it to the final against Detroit, and one of my friends said to me, you know, Washington, they may be able to beat Detroit. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll bet you that Washington doesn't win a game. If they win one game, I'll give you $100. But if they don't, you pay me $100. And of course, I won the money, because to me, it was obvious Detroit was just going to obliterate them. It's not like that in this league anymore, right?
Yeah,
it's just
you
not.
lucked out in game 2 of that series, though.
It doesn't matter. Still,
no.
We won game 7, 3-2 at home. You could say, well, you only won it 3-2. Well, but we won. And what I'm saying is Detroit, in those days, there was a clear superior team when you went teams in these series. There isn't today. I mean, you can't tell me who's going to win out of Florida and Tampa Bay last night or the next game. I mean, you can tell me who won last night, I think.
Yeah. But
that's why we're on here.
Predictions are made based on the previous game, the previous season. It's basically revisiting recent history and making your decision based off that.
Right. And you can't do it right now very accurately. Which means that the gaming industry is making a ton of money. And the poor schmucks that are betting are losing a ton of money.
You one of those?
No, I couldn't. I was doing the HOA meeting last night.
By the way, the years that you were referring to with the consecutive sweeps, 95 through 98, Devils over Detroit, Avalanche over Panthers, Red Wings over Flyers, Red Wings over Caps, in that order.
Very good. You had that right at the tip of your tongue there, ready to go with that stuff. It's not like we knew this was coming. You had those nuggets ready to go all the time.
Well, without a lot of hair there's a lot of room to think up top. So that's kind of
how all the hair gets burned off from all the wood burning?
That's what I'd like to say. But if you saw my grades throughout school, you would think otherwise. I milked an awful lot out of a bachelor's degree. I'm just going to tell you that.
I used to say to my mother, because in Canada our grades were percentages, and my mother'd say, like, if you would just work a little bit harder, you could get 80s. And I say, Mom, 50 is a pass. Why do I need to get 80s when I can pass with a 50?
When I was 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be in hockey in some way, shape, or form. So I applied where I needed to apply, and the others, I just got by. And here we are.
Here we are. And not that many years later.
That's right. Well, easy for you to say. Let's hit the 2 games on Monday evening. Roadies had won all 3 games in the Florida-Tampa Bay series. The Lightning got back into it on Saturday. Big 5-1 win. Brandon Hagel back in the lineup for Game 4 after being suspended for his hit on Alex Barkov. But it turned out not for very long.
No, not for very long. And then when I saw that hit, which was Ekblad on Brandon Hagel, I didn't think it was that bad until you really watched it over again and you saw the impact on the jaw. And that's where concussions come from, by the way, from the jaw. When the jawbone gets hit back, that causes a concussion.
Let's go through this game gradually, because just the tie-in and the intersections are really quite something. So, first goal, Brad Marchand does all the work getting in deep on Anton Lundell's goal. And to think that Marchand's playing third line with Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen, that says something for a guy that was a top-line player in Boston. And by the way, on that goal, we're going to talk about coverage, not only here, but later in this game, where it broke down for Tampa Bay. On that goal, 4 of the 5 players for the Lightning were in the corner. And Yanni Gourde happened to come in off of the point, but he was still on the right side of the ice also.
Yeah, it was perplexing why Perbix was in the corner when he should have been in front of the net. Like, why he got drawn into the corner, I'll never know. So that put Anton Lundell right in front of the net all by himself, quickly put it right over the right leg of Vasilevsky, and they had the 1-0 lead.
So that goal comes midway through the second period, and then the hit. Ekblad with the forearm to the head of Hagel, the 8:37 mark. And there's been some dispute now whether or not Ekblad should have been ejected. Was it even penalized? And certainly for the Lightning, that Matthew Tkachuk was not suspended for his hit on Jay Gensel at the end of Game 3. This has their ire up even a little bit higher now because their players are getting hit. Nothing's happening to the Panther players. Their player hits Alex Barkov, beating Brandon Hagel, and he gets suspended for a game. And now Hagel is the recipient of this hit.
And has to leave the game and doesn't come back, and is a big player for Tampa, an important player. And John Cooper, who usually stays pretty composed behind the bench, he's got that one position that he stands in, hands behind his back, leaning against the glass most of the game. He was just in rare form. He was so angry about that non-call. But you know what, Vic? If they don't see it, they don't see it. There's nothing anybody can do. You can get mad all you want. You can yell and scream, why didn't you see this? Look up at the board. You can see the replay, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It can't be called. It's like the cop wasn't there when you went 100 miles an hour down the 30-mile-an-hour street. Yeah. He wasn't there. And you can yell and scream at the cops all you want, but they weren't there.
From the replay, it looked to me that there were 2 players that were in the vicinity of the sight line of the referee, and that could have affected his ability to see it. And I know Mess got into this discussion with Dave Jackson, who I'm going to have lunch with, and I'm going to ask him about this. But I think it is possible that the official was screened.
I have no doubt he was screened, or they were screened, the 2 of them, and the linesman as well, because the linesman could have told the referee what happened, and nobody saw it. And I'm sure they were screened. Otherwise, they would have done something about it. But you know what? It's amazing that Florida's luck in this series on that way, because that is luck. There's nothing but luck when you do an illegal hit to the head and nobody sees it. You got lucky.
They did. But soon after that, they get a couple of goals 11 seconds apart from a couple of pretty unlikely sources in Mitchell Chaffee and Eric Chernak. And that's when you saw that emotion really come out from John Cooper behind the bench. Because as you said, rarely does he look that fired up. And I think just the confluence of events really spurred that reaction for him.
Oh, absolutely. Because first of all, you're boiling inside. You've lost another player. You're down 1-0. And now all of a sudden, within 11 seconds, you've got the lead, and it's like a big F you to everybody else. Like, you think you can beat us. Look at this. We're coming back. And that's what I saw in John during that little exhibit of emotion that he showed behind the bench.
This third period is one of these things that you couldn't write it up in any sort of Hollywood drama. Because Ekblad, of all players, winds up getting the tying goal, but it gets nullified because both Sam Bennett and Marchand were offside. But something I want to point out here was that the puck was in the Tampa Bay zone for 30 seconds prior to the goal being scored, and Girgensons actually turned the puck over, which led to Ekblad's tying goal at that point before it was nullified. So another question here is, how long should a puck be in the offensive zone after it crosses the blue line before you say, you know what, the play's going to continue, offside is not going to be called regardless? And there was a change of possession also in here.
I think the rule should be that when possession changes, your chances of video is done. I just don't like that the game goes on for a minute, or like you said, it went on 30 seconds this time, but it could have gone on a minute. Then all of a sudden, wind the tape back, look way back here, there was an offside. And even though Tampa clearly could have got the puck out, they weren't able to. And then Florida scored. And now, you know, that goal doesn't count because a minute ago we were offside.
Yeah. So that took place about 13 and a half minutes or so left in regulation. And the 2-1 lead stood up until under 4 minutes left. Jake Guentzel with a turnover up the left wing boards. In the meantime, nobody is covering the front of the net. Again for the Lightning. And who winds up? Oh, it's Ekblad once again to tie the game with 3:37 left. So from going to almost having to pull your goaltender, Ekblad ties the game. And then 11 seconds after that, Seth Jones leaks one through Vasilevsky.
Yeah.
And now it's Tampa that's going to be pulling their goalie.
Well, now it's Vasilevsky who's going to have to head to the bench, and Bobrovsky can breathe a sigh of relief. He's going to stay in his net. And within 11 seconds?
11 seconds.
That changed from Bobrovsky going to the bench to Vasilevsky having to go to the bench.
The two Tampa goals and those two goals, both 11 seconds apart. So like we said, you can't write this up. Carter Verhaeghe gets the empty netter. And it's important that, again, secondary, tertiary scoring coming through in this game, because Reinhart and Barkov haven't exactly lit it up. So that they're getting goals from other sources is huge here. And while we're at it, Nikita Kucherov is now goalless in 14 consecutive playoff games going back to game 1 of their series against Toronto 2 years ago.
And if you remember, I've been saying that Kucherov wasn't the same player, and you had said, well, he got 3 assists, and I said, yeah, okay, but I don't see him the same way I see him during the regular season as the same player. He just doesn't look like it to me. He's getting rid of the puck quicker. He's doing it with a little bit of reckless abandon. But getting back to the 11 seconds on the 2 Tampa Bay goals was a new record for Tampa Bay, the quickest 2 goals in their franchise history during the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was, because I didn't hear if it was a record for the Panthers.
Right.
Did they say that on the broadcast at all that you heard?
I don't know if they did or not. I think what I heard was that this was the first time that 2 teams in the same game had goals 11 or fewer seconds apart. So it's an Elias Sports Bureau special.
So there were 4 goals scored within 22 seconds, albeit not. Yeah.
In effect. So if you're John Cooper, and after the game, he had said, I liked a lot of the things we did for most of the night. We just didn't get it done at the end, something to that effect. But, boy, this is a tough one to swallow for Tampa going back home for Game 5 on Wednesday.
It is really tough. If Hagel can't play, I don't think Ekblad will be playing in that game either. I think player safety will do something today about that hit if Hagel is hurt. If Hagel can come back. Maybe they'll take that into consideration. I don't know. But did you see the interview with John Cooper where they asked him about the hit? And he said, well, what do you think? You saw it. You answer it.
Yeah.
And because it's true. All they're trying to do is bait him into saying something that they already know what the answer is. You can't, nobody can say, oh, well, I didn't mind it. I didn't think it was bad. I mean, he charged in from the point and knocked the guy out.
It's what reporters do.
I know.
You've answered enough of those questions in your time.
I have. And back in the days when print was everything.
Yeah.
It wasn't podcasters asking me questions.
And that your answer is turned around before you even finish your sentence.
Or it's sliced and diced. So you may have a 3-sentence answer, but they only take 4 words out of it.
Yeah. There you go. Dallas and Colorado. Coming off of the emotional 4-0 win. Total 60-minute effort for the Avs in this game. And you had said, because I promised I was going to hold you to it, and I'm going to hold you to it, you fully expected the Avalanche to come out and win Game 5 with a chance to lock up the series in Game 6. Instead, they're going home trying to salvage their season. But it just goes to show you how quickly things can turn around because you get in a mindset that there's going to be continuation coming over the previous game. And that was done in 9 seconds last night. Wyatt Johnson with a bad angle goal of Mackenzie Blackwood, and the Stars were off and running.
Oh, I mean, it was amazing. You know, I have an app on my phone, and all of a sudden I look down at it. The puck hadn't dropped yet, and it's 1-0 Dallas. And on my app, and I'm like, what? How could it be 1-0 Dallas? And then the puck drops on TV, and I see Wyatt Johnson's goal, and I'm like, holy moly, what a way to start this game.
So for a club that had led for all of 1 minute and 2 seconds for the first 4 games combined, now they're playing with the lead. They're getting chased in this game. And then the final minute of the first period, Thomas Harley takes a shot that Blackwood gets his blocker on, but he flips it straight up in the air. It hits his back and ends up in the net. So even though I didn't think that the Avs played a bad first period, a couple of bad goals against, and they're chasing it at 2-0 at the intermission.
Yeah, then when you say bad goals, it's unlucky goals because there's nothing Blackwood could do. I mean, it's not like he made a mistake by the way he tried to stop that goal, and the other guy was an inch off the post, right? I mean, when the Johnson goal went in. Bit of trivia about these two series before we go on the Colorado-Dallas series and the Florida-Tampa Bay series. Both series are a city versus a state. Florida versus the city of Tampa.
Yeah.
The city of Dallas versus the state of Colorado.
Tampa Bay isn't a city. It
isn't. I said Tampa, though.
I know. It's being played in Tampa. But
I know they call them Tampa Bay, even though there is no place other than the bay that is called Tampa Bay.
Moving on at breakneck speed here. Avalanche press. Dallas ready for them. Mikko Rantanen, his first goal of the series. Wyatt Johnson gets his second. Mason Marchment gets his first. Rope Hintz hits the empty net. The upshot here is that all of the big guns that we were mentioning, after Game 4, they come through. Their guys get it going. They're off the mat. And this can only spell good things for the Dallas Stars heading into Game 6. But at this point, we have seen so much. There's nothing predictable about this. So to say they're going to go into Denver and light it up a second consecutive game, or even in a Game 7, if that game is played, I think we'd be foolish to say anything like that.
You would be, because you don't know. The interesting thing will be which wood does the Avs take out of their bag? Do they use their Wedgwood or their Blackwood?
Well, Scott Wedgwood replaced Blackwood for the start of the third period. I had texted you after the second that I think we're going to see a goaltending change. And we did that. And I think it was just, you know what? This game is not going well for us. Score was 5-2 after the second. Give our other guy, Wedgwood, a little bit of work. And then Blackwood comes back in, and I would fully expect that he is going to start in game number 6.
Did you think about the fact that Scott Wedgwood was playing back against his old team again? Because Wedgwood was there earlier in the year.
Yeah,
he was the backup to Ottinger earlier in the season. You didn't think of that?
No, I thought of it, but I didn't think anything of it. Besides,
it's just a fact. Just like Rantanen is playing against his old team.
Yeah. And Nichushkin also.
Yes, but a lot longer time ago. I was thinking when Rantanen got his first goal of the playoffs, and the play-by-play man said that's Rantanen's ex-playoff goal in his career.
Mm-hmm.
He should have said, and all, let's say it was 16, all 15 before were for Colorado. This is the first one that's against Colorado.
Yep. Some little bit of commonality there. But regardless, Colorado now has to respond in game 6. Nathan McKinnon had a goal and an assist. But Cale Makar only has 2 assists in this series. He was a -3 in game 5. And I thought he was really good, even though he had no points in game 4. But his production has dropped off, hasn't been able to get shots through, missed the net a number of times. And he's a guy that from the back end really needs to pick it up for Colorado in game 6.
Yeah, but I have no doubt that he will. I mean, he is such a superstar. I have no doubt that Makar will do that. I don't know why he was not himself in game 5, but I look for a big response from him.
Another side note to this, Miro Heiskanen, the top defenseman for Dallas, is close. He's skating. He's going full bore. And this win buys the Stars a little bit of time here because there is an extra day off before Game 6, which will be played on Thursday. And then Game 7 would not be until Saturday. So it is possible that Heiskanen gets another 4 or 5 days before Dallas would really need him in a potential 7th game.
Correct. And that's huge for the Stars.
The start time for the 6th game of the Avs-Stars series will depend on whether Toronto or not finishes off Ottawa in Game 5 on Tuesday. And speaking of which, that series is 3-1 for the Leafs. 7 o'clock on ESPN. Do the Leafs get this done, or does this start to get uncomfortable?
I think they get it done. And remember what we just said at the beginning of the show. These things are unpredictable. But if you're asking me for a prediction, this is a different Toronto team than I've seen in other years. This team, I think, will finish off Ottawa. Ottawa's put in a good fight. They've made tremendous strides in making the playoffs, being the 7th seed. They're going to improve again, but I think it's time for Toronto to advance.
This will say a lot. If Toronto can finish this and actually meet the expectations that a lot of people have that they're going to be able to do so.
Yes, I agree. And it's going to be a very interesting one to watch.
New Jersey and Carolina will play Game 5. The Hurricanes are trying to wrap up that series with a 3-1 lead, 7:30 on TBS. And the question here, in goal for Carolina, is whether Freddie Anderson will be able to go. I have to believe that Rod Brind'Amour will be very comfortable with Pyotr Kochetkov in goal and hopefully win that game, at least if you're a Hurricanes fan, and buy some time for Anderson to get healthy and rested up for round 2.
Absolutely. And I don't think Anderson will be back, judging by his history of injuries and how long it takes him to get back in the lineup. He's not a guy who gets back real quickly after he's injured. So as we said about the game in Newark the other day, it was a pedestrian game. And this is a pedestrian series. I don't like to say that there's ever a playoff series that's not exciting, but if you had to pick the least exciting series, I would pick this one.
I won't disagree, but it's had its moments as well. But again, the Devils going to be totally up against it. We have documented their injuries ad nauseum, and Luke Hughes, Brendan Dillon, Jonathan Kovacevic, all expected to be out for Game 5 on Tuesday. So the depth of the Devils' defense are going to really be up against it, against a Carolina team that Brind'Amour is going to have them bringing it from puck drop.
Oh, yeah, and they're going to be shooting, as you once said, from the parking lot. As soon as they get there before the game, they're going to start shooting. And so Markstrom's going to have his hands full. You know, I give New Jersey a lot of credit for the resilience that they've had, though, with all the injuries and bang-ups and everything they've got going on. They're still playing hard, and they're hanging in there. And again, Vic, I don't know. Maybe New Jersey gets a win in Carolina. I would doubt it because Carolina's very good at home, and Carolina's the better team, judging by the regular season, but you just don't know.
Always and never. The two words that are not supposed to be used.
Correct.
Third game of the night, Minnesota and Vegas. Game 5 with the series tied 2 apiece. 9:30 on ESPN. This has been an extremely competitive series. I think maybe the most even of the 8 series thus far. Both have proven that they can go into the other team's rink and win. What are you seeing here?
Well, I see exactly what you just said. Both teams have proven they can win in the other team's building. Minnesota, there couldn't be much different places, right, than St. Paul, Minnesota, and Las Vegas, Nevada. And again, what have we got here? We've got a state versus a city that's not using the real city name, because there is no Vegas. There's only Las Vegas.
Yeah, I feel so geographically enriched
by
this podcast.
This is the kind of things I try to bring forward. But it's going to be interesting. And you know what? I think that in some ways, Kaprizov has outplayed Eichel. If you want to do superstar for superstar, wouldn't you say that Kaprizov has been better than Eichel?
1,000%.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's what I'll be looking at tonight is Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and the young man, Matt Boldy, who has been just terrific for them. As well as, of course, there'll be a lot of stress on Philip Gustafsson to see that he can keep playing as good a goal as he's played for Minnesota. And we'll see if Vegas can bring it tonight. Mark Stone and his crew. Let's see what they do at home, because this is obviously it's a huge game. If Minnesota was to win this, they go back with a chance to eliminate Vegas in St. Paul. If Vegas wins this, the opposite. So this is going to be a good one.
I liked what I saw from Vegas in Game 4 to even this series. I think Eichel is due. Despite the fact that the Wild have played him very tight, he's too good a goal scorer to be kept off the sheet for an entire series. And I think if there's going to be a game that he's going to break out, this is going to be the one.
I can see that too. In fact, he's due, and he's too good not to contribute and do some wonderful things offensively. But again, that's a game starting at 9:30 on ESPN that I'm very anxious to watch.
Well, how about at 10 o'clock, half hour later on TBS, Edmonton and LA, with that series tied at 2 apiece. The reality here is the Kings could have had this series wrapped up in 4 and have not been able to hold on to leads. They're much more comfortable at home, although they've played well on the road this year. They didn't get either game in Edmonton, and now they come back having blown a late lead, game number 4, losing the game in overtime, and simply not playing the same way in the second half of third periods.
Something else that we always talk about this series is Calvin Pickard. Will be back in the net for a third straight game, and you got to give an advantage in goal still to Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
Over Edmonton. And so Again, very intriguing, very intriguing. If Edmonton could pull a win in LA, which is really difficult. I mean, we watched so many LA home games this year, and it'd almost be like, it's amazing. Somebody finally won in Edmonton, or I'm sorry, in LA. Somebody finally won. And it was usually when LA was tired, they're coming back off a back-to-back or something like that. They're very good at home. They're very comfortable there. I doubt that Edmonton's very comfortable in LA. And by the way, I mentioned before, could there be any more different cities than St. Paul and Las Vegas? How about Edmonton, Alberta, and Los Angeles, California? Those are pretty different cities as well. Game 5, it's going to be a fun one.
110-degree difference during the middle of winter. So,
yeah,
just bringing some climate to your geography.
Yes. Yeah, well, you are a meteorologist.
I just play one in the movies. But I want to go back to Pickard for 1 second before we move to a couple of other notes. He's got to steal a game, I believe. And as we've said, he's been good. He really hasn't had to be great. And I believe he's got to be great in order for the Oilers to prevail this evening.
Is he capable of being great?
I think every goalie is capable of being great. But in the spotlight, you got to remember that he has started the 2 games in Edmonton. Now he's going to unfriendly turf. And this is where I think you're going to see a lot about him as a goaltender, as a playoff goaltender. A lot different than playing the regular season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're facing the same team for the 3rd time in a row, Kelvin Pickard is doing that, and he knows that he's in that spot and the heat is on. You could say that he stole the game in Edmonton because of the blown lead that LA gave back to the Oilers. I mean, he was the goalie of record that won that game, but I agree with you. He's got to come through. He's going to have to be great, and then Edmonton can see if they can win a game in LA. And if they do win that game in LA, I think it's over.
You've got this history in this series of not being able to protect leads, so the Oilers would go back home with all kinds of confidence that no matter what the circumstance, they're going to be able to prevail. But that is really putting the cart way before the horse. Let's let this one play out. Let's give Pickard his opportunity to shine, and we'll see what happens.
At 10 o'clock on TBS. Now, interesting, you're the TV guy. Why is it that tonight both networks are involved when most nights it's one network or the other?
Because it gives both networks the opportunity to show an equal amount of games. And as the series goes on and series drop out, obviously there's less to choose from. So I believe it's a balance thing.
Well, it'll be easy now to compare the 2 broadcasts of ESPN quality and TBS quality and see which clown is funnier. I'll leave that where it is.
I think, yes, you will. So just split your screen, put them side by each, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right. A few other notes. On the injury front, Gabe Vilardi expected back for the Jets for Game 5 against St. Louis on Wednesday. He rejoins Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor on the top line. Alex Iafallo had done a commendable job, but Vilardi returning comes none too soon for a Jets team that got hit for a 12 spot in the 2 games in St. Louis.
Yeah, they're going to have to go back to being the dominant team that they've been all year long and start it right now, right at home. And they're going to have to get on St. Louis hard in this next game.
No shortage of confidence for Jim Montgomery's club. But no update on one of Montgomery's defensemen, Tyler Tucker, who left Game 4 with a right leg injury after it looked like he toe-picked and his leg kind of crumbled underneath him. So we're still waiting for an update there. On the coaching front, and we talked about this a little bit with John Davidson on NHL Wraparound Monday. Mike Sullivan and the Penguins part ways after 10 seasons. He won the Cup with the Penguins. in 2016 and 2017, but has missed the playoffs each of the last 3 seasons. But from the GM perch, Neil, what kind of coach are the Penguins looking for next? Because Sullivan was a no-nonsense guy, got a lot out of his players for as long as he could. In the end game, didn't really have the greatest of rosters to work with. So with Crosby and Malkin and Letang all coming towards the end, your prospects and your support players are not the best in the NHL either. So if you're Kyle Dubas, what type of coach are you looking to bring in?
It's easy. Whatever the analytics tell him to bring in. Isn't that the only thing he pays attention to is analytics? Because, again, the other thing about this Mike Sullivan situation is they said that it was a mutual parting of the ways, and yet I watched an interview with Dubas yesterday where he clearly says he fired him. And he let Sidney Crosby know in advance that this was coming down, and he said, I've got to make these decisions that are best for the team. And he went on to explain to the media, how he has to operate that way. I just found it funny that they put out an announcement that says they mutually decided to part ways. And then Dubas comes out with saying that they had to fire him. So it was really strange to me. Who will Dubas hire? Who knows? Like, if I was a GM, I could answer that. I mean, I could try to answer that, but I have no idea with Kyle Dubas who he'd hire.
Is this a situation that perhaps, as opposed to going to the recycle bin, you go to the college ranks and maybe you try to get a David Carl out of Denver and maybe a completely different approach for Sidney Crosby, which may be even refreshing for him as he winds down his last few years?
Or do you make David Quinn the coach who's on the staff and hasn't been let go and still there, and they said they're going to interview him, and then you get a little bit of both. You get the college coach with NHL experience.
You got to remember also that the power play under Quinn did improve significantly. So
absolutely. And David Quinn has really, not that you have a fair shot in Pittsburgh, because I don't think you're going to see them in the playoffs for a long time. But David Quinn has had a bad Ranger team to try to coach, missing the playoffs each year that he was there.
Yeah.
And then he had a horrific Sharks team that he tried to coach. That's not his fault that's where he got hired. I mean, he took those jobs. He did his best. It's going to be a tough place to coach for whoever takes this job, because let's face it, the team is not very good.
We'll let that unfold. It is now time for this day in Stanley Cup history. So I always like your reactions to this, because you never know
Stanley
where I'm
Cup
coming
history. No, I never know where you're coming from at any time.
Yeah. It's like trying to hit a knuckleball.
That's right.
All right. Well, here we go. 49 series, Stanley Cup history, have gone to Game 7 overtime. April 29th, along with April 16th, have had the most. 4 Game 7s have been decided on overtime on this date. And so we're going to go through each of the 4, and you could quickly tell us what you remember about each of them. In 1978, the quarterfinals, Lanny McDonald scores on Glenn Resch to give the Maple Leafs a 2-1 win and advance them to the semifinals. Now, just tell you, Lanny was my favorite player growing up. Wow. The mustache, it was the big shot, it was the complete game that he played.
The Stan Mikita helmet.
Stan Mikita helmet.
Number 7.
All of it. And, of course, being a Ranger fan, that he knocked out the Islanders, that was a big deal for me. That was one of my favorite goals of all time. And he played that series with a broken nose and a frozen wrist from an injury that he had there also. So, pretty memorable one for Lanny.
Yeah, and you asked me what I remember about it. I remember Roger Nielsen was the coach of that Toronto team, and Roger was in the infancy of video, Captain Video back then, because he'd used to study video, something they do now all day long. Beating the Islanders was a big deal because the Islanders were just about to turn the corner to the dynasty. People saw it coming. They saw that dynasty coming, that powerhouse coming. And it was a big disappointment to the Islanders and their faithful that they got knocked out by Toronto.
Boye Salming was actually hurt for Game 7 of that series. Ian Turnbull was the monster on the back line for them. So quite a memory there.
And here's an interesting fact about Ian Turnbull. Ian Turnbull and Dennis Potvin played together as defensemen on the Ottawa 67s. And of course, then Dennis was taken first overall by the New York Islanders, which got the whole thing started, and Ian Turnbull taken by Toronto. But two great defensemen at the time.
Our second game, 1986 Adams final, and Claude Lemieux comes out from behind the net with a backhander against Mike Liut to advance the Canadiens to the semifinal, the conference final against the New York Rangers.
And of course, Claude Lemieux in that time, and this is 1986, and they happened to win the Stanley Cup that year, did the Montreal Canadiens. That was a year that Edmonton lost unexpectedly to Calgary.
That's right.
When Steve Smith accidentally put the puck off the back of Grant Fuhr's left leg and back into his own net, which caused the defeat and the victory for the Flames. Claude Lemieux was just starting his career as an irritant that he became throughout his whole career, and a fabulous player. By the way, a guy that we've talked about, other players that play, like Brad Marchand, for example, like Sam Bennett, like Matt Tkachuk, who are extremely gifted players, but just get under your skin. Tom Wilson, maybe even a better example of a today's Claude Lemieux. But that was quite a year, 1986. Montreal, not expected to win the Cup that year, won it against the Calgary Flames, and I remember it like yesterday.
That's why we do these things. And in 1997, there were two Game 7 overtime decisions. The Sabres and the Ottawa Senators in the East quarterfinal. Derek Plant scoring from distance against Ron Tugnutt from above the right wing circle. And this was probably in the earlier ages of having cameras in the nets, and a great replay showing Tugnutt covering his face in despair in the foreground, while the Sabres, you could see them jumping up and down on the bench after the goal goes in and pouring onto the ice to mob Plant.
Yeah, and this was, of course, in the days of Ottawa just becoming a pretty good team in that era, that they did end up at 1 year in the final. And, of course, Ron Tugnutt was a really good goaltender, played for the Peterborough Petes in junior, and went on to have a real good career. But, yeah, I remember the despair. And, of course, the goalie always feels that way when a goal goes in overtime, much less from the circle.
Later that night, in a 2-7 matchup, the Edmonton Oilers go into Dallas, win 4-3. Dougie Weight, former Ranger, to Tard Marchand, former Ranger, who goes around and literally corkscrews Grant Ledyard, former Ranger, en route to beating Andy Moog.
Not former Ranger.
No.
No, those were Dougie Weight and Marchand was and that's Marchand with a T, not Marchand with a D. Was a really fast player and could really accelerate quickly, and it was small, but he was one of the guys that could play in that era of power forwards and clutching and grabbing and at a pretty diminutive size, Marchand. So that was quite a series. Edmonton played Dallas a number of times and had great series.
And you'll remember right before that goal, Curtis Joseph made a diving save across the crease to rob Joe Nieuwendyk. Otherwise, Dallas would have advanced.
Yeah, and Joe Nieuwendyk was a great Dallas star. So, yeah. And Curtis Joseph had a wonderful career too, and probably is best known for his time in Toronto, but was in St. Louis, was in Edmonton, and was good wherever he went.
Did you enjoy this trip down memory lane?
I love it. I love it.
Great. We'll do another one tomorrow. That'll do it for our show for today. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. Please remember to subscribe, like us, and reach out to us. We've gotten a couple of really nice emails from Marco in Milan, Italy, and from Joe, a lifelong Ranger fan. So keep those emails coming to us. You can reach us at NHLWraparound@gmail.com or individually Neil at NHL Wraparound or Vic at NHL Wraparound. We will be back with another show on Wednesday, recapping the 4 games from Tuesday and looking ahead to Wednesday. Enjoy the hockey.